Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're embarking on a fascinating journey into a book that honestly really challenges how most of us think about getting things done, about success. It's Thomas M. Sterner's The Practicing Mind, bringing discipline and focus into your life. In a world that often feels like this nonstop race, speed, quick results, always chasing the next big win, this book, it offers something really different, a shift. It pushes back against that common idea that, the real joy, the real fulfillment is only waiting for you at the finish line after you've hit the goal. Instead, Sterner argues, pretty convincingly, I think, that the real good stuff, that deep satisfaction, isn't really about the destination. Not at all. It's about the deliberate, mindful process of getting there, cultivating this mindset of always growing, always practicing, finding peace, finding purpose, and the journey itself. We're going to unpack some surprising insights, some really practical wisdom that could honestly change how you approach your work, your hobbies, maybe even just doing the dishes. Get ready for some real aha moments here.
And you're absolutely right. That shift in perspective, that's exactly what so many people are looking for right now, aren't they, in this, crazy, fast-paced life. Thomas M. Sterner, the author, he brings this really unique mix of experiences to the table. That's what makes his insights so powerful, so relatable. His background isn't like purely academic. It covers so much ground music, sports, business, even, believe it or not, being a high-level piano technician.
So,
Yeah, exactly. And all that varied experience, it gave him this really deep understanding of the challenges we all face, personal growth, professional mastery, all of it. What's really cool is how he takes all that rich, varied experience and boils it down into, well, practical wisdom, things you can actually do. His work isn't just theory, it's more like a toolkit designed to help you find that inner calm, seriously boost your focus, and make real, lasting progress without all the stress and anxiety that usually comes with chasing achievements these days. So, our mission today is to really unpack how developing what he calls a practicing mind can turn even like your most routine daily stuff into genuine paths for deeper fulfillment, helping you get not just the results, but that real inner mastery and genuine satisfaction.
Okay, so let's really get into this core idea, process over product. For a lot of us, that just sounds backwards, doesn't it? I mean, think about it. Our world is so results-driven. School grades, quarterly reports, fitness goals, even how we kind of judge relationships sometimes. It's all about the outcome, the product. We're constantly measured by results. So how does Sterner even start to introduce this fundamental shift? It seems pretty radical. What led him there?
Well, what's really fascinating here is that this insight, it wasn't just some theory he cooked up. It came directly from his own life, his own struggles. He figured it out by watching himself, basically.
So it started with his own experiences of maybe failure, dissatisfaction, is that
yeah,
right? Tell us about that personal journey, the struggles that led him to this idea.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Sterner's really open about his early struggles with, sticking with things, maintaining interest. He noticed this pattern in himself, and it's super common, right? You get this huge burst of enthusiasm for something new, a hobby, whatever. You're excited, maybe you buy the gear, and then inevitably the interest just fades. Or it gets hard and you drop it. You jump in, feel motivated, and then poof, gone. It's that feeling, that let down feeling when things get tough or when you don't see results right away. We've all been there. He realized these early failures, especially when he was trying to learn music, weren't because he lacked talent or desire. It was because he didn't understand how to practice properly. More than that, he lacked a perspective that valued practice itself. He was focused on being good at music, not on, engaging with the doing of music. His whole view shifted because of three main things, three big influences. First, taking piano lessons again as an adult. But this time, he was more mature, less obsessed with the outcome. He wasn't aiming for Carnegie Hall, just engaging with the piano. Second, he got into studying Eastern philosophies, things like Zen Buddhism, which really emphasize mindfulness, being in the moment. And third, this is the unexpected one, working for years as a concert piano technician, which involves super focused, really repetitive, meticulous work.
A piano technician. Wow. That does sound repetitive, maybe even boring. How did that lead to this whole philosophy? Where's the big insight in tuning pianos?
But it was exactly the repetitive nature, the intense detail, this sort of solitary focus of tuning and maintaining those big concert grands that's what changed things for him. He talks about learning to get lost in the process. That phrase just nails it, doesn't it? At first, yeah, maybe it felt monotonous, adjusting the string, then the next one, then the next, day after day. But gradually, that turned into this amazing ability to focus intensely on each tiny individual step. Right now, this string, that seemingly mundane work, it became like a moving meditation for him, an escape from the usual pressures. It wasn't about how many pianos did I finish today. It was about, is this string perfectly in tune right now. Okay. And that developed incredible self-observation, noticing his own reactions, his movements, his mental state. And it gave him this deep appreciation for practice, not just as a way to get somewhere, but as a form of self-discipline, self-discovery even. He really emphasizes that practice for him isn't just about the thing you're doing, music, golf, whatever. It's about understanding and using the mechanics of practice, that focused, non-judgmental presence in anything you do. That deep engagement, even in boring tasks, that became the foundation. That's why he first found that inner calm that comes from being totally immersed.
So that whole journey through repetition, through meticulous work, led him straight to this idea you call the process, not product paradox. It feels like the core is. By deliberately not focusing on the end result, you somehow end up with better results more easily. How does he explain that? What's the magic there?
Right? It sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? His main point is that real mastery, real satisfaction, comes from fully immersing yourself in the journey, the ongoing growth, not rushing towards some fixed goal. The core idea, his big insight is, when you focus on the process, the intended product takes care of itself with fluid ease. It's a paradox because everything in our society screams the opposite, right? Fixate on the goal, visualize success, chase it. But Sterner says that focus on the future outcome, that constant mental reaching, it creates huge stress, anxiety, pressure, and that emotional baggage. It actually gets in the way of real progress and enjoyment. If your mind is stuck in the future, worrying, it's not fully here in the present, which is where the actual work happens. He gives this great example from his own life. Learning golf, he noticed loads of golfers really struggle to improve, even after playing for years, decades sometimes. Why? Because they were obsessed with hitting a good shot, getting a low score the product, but they weren't paying attention to how they practiced, or if they even practiced effectively. So when he started golf, he deliberately sought out instruction. And because he knew from music that complex skills take time and specific practice mechanics, he focused meticulously on that. He specifically contrasts his approach with his classmates who just wanted to, like, wake up skilled overnight without the tedious practice part.
That sounds so familiar.
Yeah.
Like wanting to speak French fluently without ever actually, speaking French. Or wanting to be a gourmet cook without spending hours just chopping onions. We want the result without the grind.
Exactly, precisely. Sterner talks about his golf practice routine. It wasn't about playing 18 holes, it was methodical, focused. He'd spend hours on the driving range, sure, but not just whacking balls. He'd focus on one tiny part of the swing, maybe just the grip, or how his wrists moved, or the follow-through, just one thing at a time. He kept a journal, wrote down observations, feelings, what worked, what didn't. He did repeated swings, not even caring where the ball went sometimes, just focusing on the feeling in his body, the mechanics. And this approach, this process focus, it kept him engaged. It stopped him getting bored. And crucially, his skills improved naturally, significantly, without that crushing pressure for immediate results. He actually found joy, like a meditative feeling, in the practice itself, which, ironically, became a stress reliever from other parts of his life. That's the connection. Focusing on the process lowers the pressure, makes it more enjoyable, and often leads to better results anyway, almost like a side effect. It's the paradox of focus. By focusing on the how, you get past the frustration of just measuring the what. And he makes this really important distinction, too, between practice and just learning. I think a lot of us miss that difference.
Oh, interesting. Practice versus learning. What's the difference there?
Yeah, he clarifies that real practice is always intentional, aware. It requires active engagement, conscious effort. It's about doing something repeatedly with attention to how you're doing it, not just going through the motions. Learning, though, that can be more passive. Sometimes it happens without you even trying, really. You might learn something from reading an article or watching a documentary, but you truly master something, make it second nature, effortless through consistent, intentional practice. That deliberate repetition is key for real skill. He also talks about multitasking, how we think we're being efficient, juggling all these things, but really, it just fragments our attention, makes us less present, disconnected. It's the total opposite of the practicing mind, which needs that single-pointed focus.
Okay, this brings up a huge question then. Why are we so product-obsessed as a society? It feels almost hardwired, always chasing the next thing. Where does that pressure come from?
Yeah, connecting it to the bigger picture. Sterner really critiques this pervasive product-oriented mindset, especially how it's baked into our education system, our workplaces. He links it directly to the rising stress, anxiety, even burnout we see everywhere. He shares examples from his own life, like struggling with math in school. The focus was all on getting the right answer on the test, right? Not on understanding why or enjoying solving the puzzle. Or this music theory class in college where kids were actually cheating. Not because they were bad kids, but because they were desperate for the product. They felt immense pressure, and the actual learning, the process just went out the window. They just needed to pass. And then he draws this really fascinating contrast between what he sees as this American obsession with immediate results, getting that external validation, and the Japanese emphasis on quality and process. He gives this amazing example, almost poetic, of a worker in a Japanese piano factory who makes one perfect piano plate instead of multiple acceptable ones. It's not about just churning things out. It's this deep cultural belief that if you focus meticulously on the process of making something perfect, the superior result happens naturally. It's not just about quantity. He talks about the long-term benefits of that approach.
Oh.
It builds patience, inner peace, a deeper sense of mastery and fulfillment, no matter what the task is. This constant societal pressure fueled by advertising, social media, performance reviews, it conditions us from day one, really. To believe our worth comes from our results, our stuff, our achievements. We're bombarded with these messages, right? Buy this, achieve that, look like this, and then you'll be happy. It subtly messes with our focus, makes us overlook the value, the satisfaction that comes directly from the process of growing, of striving. It keeps us in this state of always wanting, never just appreciating.
Okay, so if embracing the process is the key to getting past all that anxiety, what's stopping us, what holds us back, it feels like a lot of internal noise, that nonstop chatter in our heads, the anxiety chasing some perfect ideal that maybe doesn't even exist.
Exactly. You've nailed a huge barrier right there. Our own internal state. Especially that grip of anxiety and the constant chase for some kind of elusive, often debilitating perfection. Sterner really breaks down how a lot of our anxiety comes directly from chasing unrealistic perfection in everything: work, looks, relationships, parenting, you name it. And that chase, it's largely fueled by external standards, society's expectations, and those highly curated, often totally fake images we see in media about what a perfect life or happiness is supposed to look like.
So you mean like those perfect Instagram feeds or the happy families in commercials? They're actually making us more stressed. That's kind of depressing.
It is, isn't it? But yeah, those idealized images, carefully crafted by marketing teams, they set these unattainable standards that contribute profoundly to dissatisfaction rather than leading to true happiness. Ads especially, they're designed to tap into our natural tendency to compare ourselves. They show us these perfect, manufactured versions of life, and they push this sneaky idea that buying this thing or achieving that status or looking that way will somehow magically make us happy, fill that void. It totally warps our view of what real happiness is, creates the cycle of wanting, striving, and never feeling good enough. Sterner says we desperately need a shift in perspective here. Use those ideals for inspiration, maybe, something to aim for, to improve towards, but never use them as a measuring stick for your self-worth. If you're constantly measuring yourself against some static, impossible ideal, you're literally setting yourself up for failure, for frustration, anxiety, feeling inadequate all the time. He uses this really simple but powerful analogy, the flower analogy. Think about a flower. It's always perfect, isn't it? At every single stage, from a tiny seed in the ground to a little sprout to a bud to full bloom, even when it starts to wilt and go back to the earth. Every stage is necessary. It's authentic. It's perfect in its own way. True perfection, he argues, isn't some fixed state you finally reach and then you stop. It's limitless, unbounded, and always in a motion of expansion. It's this continuous unfolding. When you really grasp that, it helps you appreciate your own progress, embrace where you are right now, find happiness in the present moment, realizing that you, like the flower, are exactly where you need to be on your journey.
Wow, that flower analogy, it really hits home. It totally reframes perfection and just lifts the pressure, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And that connects right back to being present, too. If perfection is a process, then now is all there is.
It absolutely does. Being present isn't just a nice idea, it's fundamental to his whole philosophy and our well-being. Stunner explains how focusing deeply on right now leads to a much richer, more fulfilling life. And at the same time, it dials down the impatience, the anxiety, the pressure. He points out how we usually block ourselves from being present. We're constantly focusing on what's next or replaying the past. Our minds are like puppies, right? Always chasing the future, worrying about a deadline, or chewing on the past, replaying conversations, failures, instead of just being here, engaging with what's actually happening. And he introduces this great concept, the beginner's mind. It's not just about being new at something. It's that natural focus, that absorption you have when you are new. As a beginner, you don't have all that baggage, right? Past failures, future expectations. You're just in it, curious, open, fully engaged. That allows for complete focus without the usual mental clutter, the self-criticism, the performance anxiety that often trips up more experienced people.
So how do we get that beginner's mind back for things we do every day? You know, the routine stuff that feels boring or tedious. How do we re-engage with the present moment then?
He gives really practical advice here, stuff you can apply to the most ordinary chores. The key is to turn them into mindful experiences. Focus on the task, engage your senses. Think about mowing the lawn. Instead of rushing, mind elsewhere, planning your next meeting, he suggests consciously shifting focus. Notice the smell of the cut grass. Feel the vibration of the mower. Hear the sound of the blades. Watch the patterns you're making. By deliberately tuning into those sensory details, right now, you change your whole perception of the task. You find unexpected value, maybe even joy, in the process itself. You turn what feels like work into something. Well, something mindful, meditative almost. That's where presence really starts to bloom.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me and probably for a lot of listeners because it's about actually gaining some control. Awareness is key. Sounds simple, but what does Sterner actually mean when he says you cannot change what you are not aware of? How does that create a practicing mind?
You're right, it sounds simple, but the implications are huge. Awareness is the absolute foundation for any kind of change, any self-improvement. Like he says, you cannot change what you are not aware of. Okay? He observes that many of us live kind of disconnected from our own thoughts, our internal chatter. We're just passively carried along by them, like a leaf on the wind, right? Blown around by every thought, every emotion, every external thing, without consciously noticing or choosing. This lack of awareness means we're constantly just reacting, not intentionally acting. To get that control back, to start shaping your experience, Sterner suggests taking on this role, being an instructor towards oneself. It means consciously stepping back, observing your own thoughts, your actions, but without judgment or emotion. Think of it like being a kind, objective teacher guiding a student. A good teacher doesn't yell if the student messes up, right? They calmly observe, figure out the problem, and give clear, helpful guidance. That non-judgmental part is crucial. It minimizes the negative stuff, shame, frustration, self-blame, that usually gets tangled up with our expectations and perceived failures. When you can watch your thoughts and actions without getting sucked in, you start to see them as just passing events, not fundamental truths about who you are. You can say, there's that anxious thought again, instead of, I am anxious. It creates space. This shift lets you replace stress and reactivity with presence and intentional action. He uses that classic analogy, being like a rider with control over the horses. The horses being your mind instead of being dragged along. An undisciplined rider, chaos, reactive, no direction, pulled by whichever horse, thought, or emotion is strongest at the moment. But a disciplined rider, through awareness and conscious effort, can steer those horses, guide their thoughts, their attention, their actions, with precision, purpose, leading to a more directed and ultimately more peaceful life. Without that basic awareness, you're like that untrained chariot rider, helpless and lacking direction, just reacting to everything. Awareness lets you recognize and manage your thoughts. That gives you real control over your actions, your choices. It's incredibly empowering. It's step one for any real change.
Okay, so we need this deep awareness, this shift in perspective. But that feels like a big mental leap. How do we actually do it? How do we build these new ways of thinking, these new behaviors into our everyday lives so they actually stick?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do we make this real, tangible? How do we translate the philosophy into action?
Well, the book offers some really powerful techniques, starting with understanding the very fabric of our behavior.
Habits.
Habits, they can feel so deeply ingrained, almost impossible to change, like they're just part of who we are. What does Sterner say about that? How does he suggest we tackle them?
He argues that habits, far from being fixed, actually dictate our behaviors. Everything from how we react automatically to situations to our daily routines. And here's the really empowering bit. All can be replaced. That's huge. It gives you agency. He then breaks down the mechanics of habit formation. Basically, consistent, focused practice repeated over time creates automatic pathways in our brain. If you do something with awareness, intentionally repeating it, it literally embeds that new behavior, that new thought pattern into your long-term memory. It starts to feel natural, effortless. This works for physical skills, like playing guitar, but also for mental patterns, like becoming less judgmental. He talks about empowerment through choice. Realizing that most of what we do is habitual gives us the power to consciously choose which habits we want to build. We can actively shape who we become. It's about knowing you have control over what you practice and what you practice consistently. That becomes you, for better or worse. Now, he acknowledges it feels weird at first. Adopting new habits can be uncomfortable, awkward, maybe even feel inefficient initially. But he stresses that due diligence in practice leads to normalization. Stick with it, and the new way starts to feel normal. The stress, the frustration, the self-doubt, they gradually fade. The key, again, is focusing on the process. Knowing mastery takes time, keeping that non-judgmental mindset free from the pressure of instant results.
Okay, let's unpack this next part. Simplify. Small, short, and slow. The four S's. These sound like the perfect antidote to modern life overwhelm, right? They totally go against the faster, more, now mantra we hear all the time.
They absolutely do, and Sterner sees these four concepts as totally vital for developing control over your practicing mind. He also stresses they're deeply interconnected. They're designed to help you consciously break free from that societal pressure that worships speed, busyness, and multitasking. It's about slowing down to speed up your growth, in a way. Let's break them down because the power is in how you use them. First, simplify. Take any big, scary goal or project, or even an emotional challenge, and consciously break it down into the simplest, most manageable pieces you can imagine. The aim is to cut through the mental clutter, that feeling of, where do I even start? Writing a book, don't think write book. Simplify it. Write one good paragraph. Learning software. Simplify. Master one feature today. Improving a relationship. Simplify. Listen without interrupting for 5 minutes. It turns the mountain into small, climbable hills. Second, small. This flows right from simplify. Once you've simplified, focus intensely on just one individual small part. Don't try to learn the whole piano piece at once. Perfect one tiny phrase. Don't try to fix all your finances. Tackle one small thing, like setting up a tiny automatic savings transfer. This granular focus stops you feeling overwhelmed and lets you really master each building block. Third, short. This is about time. Instead of trying to grind away for hours, which leads to burnout, dedicate short, defined blocks of time. Maybe 25 minutes, maybe 45, like the Pomodoro technique, if you know that. This makes it feel less daunting. It reduces the mental load. And kind of paradoxically, you build momentum because you're constantly completing these short bursts. It makes practice sustainable. You're only ever committing to the next short interval. And fourth, slow. This one's maybe the most countercultural. Working deliberately slower encourages meticulous attention to detail while paradoxically increasing efficiency and reducing stress. It's not about being lazy, it's about being deeply present. When you consciously slow down, your brain has space to process, to notice things, to make small corrections. It leads to deeper engagement. You can kind of lose track of time because you're so focused, almost in a meditative state. Stirner found this himself as a piano tech. When he deliberately slowed down, he actually finished jobs faster and with higher quality than when he rushed. Plus, he felt calmer. It's about precision, not just speed.
So it's not about just being fast, but a different kind of efficiency, one that values depth, quality, precision over just getting it done quickly.
Exactly that. And he points out how interconnected they are. Working slowly helps you simplify because you have to focus on one thing at a time. Breaking tasks into small parts works perfectly with short work intervals. He's very aware this mindset shift goes against every thought system we're used to. Our culture glorifies speed, multitasking, instant results. This is about presence, intention, quality over quantity. So the practical takeaway for you, listening. Pick one thing, something you've been avoiding or struggling with. Apply the S's. Simplify it. Break it into tiny parts. Work on it in short bursts. And most importantly, do it slowly, with focus. Consistently practicing this simplify, small, short, slow approach. It'll build these powerful new habits and seriously cut down your stress while boosting your effectiveness and enjoyment.
This all sounds like it leads towards that inner calm, that quiet mind we all crave. But how do we actually get there? Especially when our minds are so wired for judgment, constantly evaluating everything, criticizing ourselves.
Yeah, you've put your finger on the core challenge there. The path to that calm state is through cultivating equanimity. Sterner defines it as a state of calmness and even-temperedness, and he sees it as absolutely essential for happiness in life. Developing equanimity takes conscious practice, especially because, as you said, our default mode is often judgment. Equanimity grows mainly through the practice of non-judgment. People with equanimity aren't emotionless, they just aren't constantly thrown off balance by life's ups and downs. And that's largely because they practice observing without labeling everything. Our tendency to judge everything ourselves, others, situations, it often leads to emotional turmoil, self-criticism, and it really clouds our thinking.
So what does that judgment process actually look like inside our heads? Is it just that inner critic voice?
It's often more subtle than just a harsh critic. Judgments pop up whenever our mind automatically compares what's happening now to something else. Past experiences, ideas about how things should be, imagined ideals. We're constantly, often without realizing it, labeling things, good or bad, right or wrong, success or failure, based on these internal standards that often shift without us noticing. This non-stop evaluation can hinder clear thinking and generate immense emotional distress. Sterner points out that our ideas of right or perfect change all the time, judging ourselves against these moving targets. It's a recipe for anxiety. We basically build our own mental prisons through comparison, and the emotional impact is huge. The feelings tied to those judgments, anger, frustration, shame, whatever, they cloud our decision making. He uses the example of aviation training. Pilots are drilled to follow procedures, checklists, without letting fear or frustration interfere. It shows the life-saving value of staying calm, objective, making decisions based on facts, not feelings.
Okay, so if judgment is just happening all the time, the very first step has to be just noticing, becoming aware that we're even doing it.
Precisely. That's the absolute crucial first move. To escape that draining cycle, you first have to become aware of when you're judging. That awareness creates distance. It's like stepping out of the mental storm and just watching it. Then, once you notice the judgment, you can start to align with what he calls the observer. That's your true self, he says, distinct from the ego or personality, the part that's doing all the judging, comparing, criticizing. The observer is the one who is quietly aware. It's the consciousness behind the thoughts, not the thoughts themselves. When you connect with that observer self, the judgments lose their power. Your emotional reactions lessen. You cultivate equanimity. You can approach things more objectively, more compassionately. You become less reactive to circumstances, to other people, to your own internal drama. And then comes the really practical tool, the DOC technique. Do, observe, correct. It's simple but incredibly powerful. A way to apply the practicing mind to almost anything. Do. You just do the activity. His example is archery. Draw the bow, aim, shoot, take the action, observe. After you do, you consciously notice the result and how you did it. But critical part without judgment, just the facts. Did the arrow hit? Where? High, low, left, right? Was your stance stable? Release smooth? Just observe like a scientist collecting data. Correct. Based only on those objective observations, you make adjustments. No emotion, no self-blame. Arrow went left. Aim slightly right next time. Stance wobbly. Adjust it. No, I'm terrible at this. Just calm, analytical correction. This constant DOC cycle, do, observe, correct, directly helps replace anxious, critical thoughts with productive, present action. It fosters a calmer, more detached response to challenges, leads to objective decisions, continuous improvement, minus the mental baggage. It's a direct path to putting equanimity into practice.
Wow. So all of this, the process, focus, awareness, non-judgment, it all weaves together into patience, self-discipline, and really understanding ourselves better. What else does this whole perspective offer? Does it expand into wider life principles beyond just learning skills or managing thoughts?
Oh, absolutely. It goes way beyond just skills. It filters into these broader, really impactful life principles that can change how you experience everything. Your relationship with time, effort, satisfaction, all of it. First, let's talk patience and worry. Sterner defines patience not as just passively waiting around, but as quiet perseverance. It's an active state of inner calm. Impatience, he says, that restless feeling. It usually means you're disconnected from the present moment. Your mind's racing ahead, focused on the outcome, the future, instead of being engaged now. So, consciously staying present, it directly tackles the roots of impatience and cuts down anxiety. Worry, similarly, he sees as basically anticipation of future events. It's that mental habit of rehearsing potential problems, things that might never even happen. And that future gazing drains your energy from the present, which is the only place you can actually do anything. His practical tip, don't let worry just run rampant all day. Schedule it. Seriously. Dedicate maybe 15 minutes a day just for reflection or worry time. Contain it. Concentrate that anxious energy instead of letting it leak out constantly. So, achieving real patience starts with recognizing that internal chatter, observing it without getting hooked, seeing the difference between your true self, the observer, and all those fears and anxieties your ego cooks up.
That makes so much sense. And we are just so conditioned for instant gratification now, aren't we? It's really hard to be patient when we expect everything instantly.
And that's exactly his next point. The real dangers of instant gratification, he critiques how pervasive it is. He mentions things like self-playing organs, you get the music without learning the instrument, or credit cards consume now, pay later. Convenient, sure. But these things subtly weaken our ability to delay gratification, to appreciate earned rewards. He emphasizes that real satisfaction arises from effort and patience in reaching a goal. There's a huge difference between just getting something handed to you and achieving it through practice, through perseverance. When you consciously value the process, the striving, the growth, you get this continuous appreciation for your progress. Not just a quick thrill when you hit the target, which fades immediately. It's the journey, the challenges, the small wins along the way. That's what builds resilience, character. That's what provides lasting fulfillment way beyond any single outcome. He notes that engaging in the arts, music, painting, whatever, is great for this. They naturally teach you about the endless nature of learning. They demand patience, process focus, and foster love for the doing, not just the finished product.
And he even brings children into it, saying we can learn from them too. That's a really nice touch.
Yeah.
How does that fit in?
It's a lovely part of his work, yeah. He points out that interacting with kids gives us these amazing chances for reciprocal teaching and learning. Kids, with their natural curiosity, their unfiltered view, they can remind us adults of basic truths about life, happiness, balance, things we often lose sight of. He tells these relatable stories, like the pogo stick story with his daughter. Instead of just buying it for her, he encouraged her to save up her own money, delayed gratification, taught her patience, the value of working for something, the joy she felt when she finally got it, way deeper than if it was just a gift. He also talks about his other daughter in competitive gymnastics. Her intense schedule led to burnout, and that forced the parents to pause, look at their own advice about balance, and make sure they were modeling it. A chance to practice what they preached. He really encourages adults to be open to learning from children because kids live so much in the present. They offer fresh perspectives, honesty, they remind us about simplicity, happiness, balance. It becomes mutual growth. It's also interesting how kids often experience time more slowly than adults do. They're just immersed in the moment. Unlike our constant feeling that time is rushing by, it really highlights how important it is to embrace the now, like kids naturally do.
This is all incredibly powerful. It really shifts how we think about motivation, achievement. But I can imagine some listeners thinking, okay, but goals are still important, right? It gives the right something to aim for. Does Stirner just say ditch all goals entirely? Is it only process?
That's a really crucial question. It gets into the nuances of motivation, and it's important to have a balanced view here. While Stirner is a huge advocate for the process-oriented approach, highlighting its massive benefits, it's worth noting the source material also includes a kind of critical interpretation. Recognizing it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution, the pure process over product idea, while transformative for many, may overlook the multifaceted nature of human motivation. The reality is, some people do seem to need clear, tangible goals to stay motivated and accountable. Focusing only on the process might not work for everyone. For some, that target provides necessary direction, drive. The discussion even mentions established goal-setting theories, specifically Locke and Latham's work, which shows that specific challenging goals can be essential milestones that foster commitment and drive progress. For lots of people, the goal isn't just the endpoint, it's the compass guiding the journey. So, to answer your question directly, it's probably not as stark either, process or goals. The source suggests the whole debate is not binary, but rather context-dependent. This really encourages you, the listener, to think about your own experience, your personality, your preferences, when you're applying Stirner's ideas. For some people, the goal provides the spark, the structure, the direction, and the mindful process is the rewarding way to get there. For others, the deepest joy really is almost entirely in the journey, and the outcome feels secondary. Ultimately, it's about finding the right balance for you. Recognizing that while mindful practice is often where the lasting fulfillment happens, clear goals can still be incredibly valuable guiding lights on that path. It's about using both wisely.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? It means your skills, your understanding, even your sense of who you are, it's all constantly evolving. And you have this incredible power to steer that growth by focusing on the how just as much, maybe even more, than the what. This deep dive into the practicing mind really shows there's this profound joy, often missed, found right in the middle of mindful practice itself. Not just when you finally cross the finish line. It's about shifting focus to the process, learning to break big things down into small, manageable steps, cultivating that real, non-judgmental awareness of your thoughts, your actions, and consciously choosing non-judgment to get past the anxiety, the perfectionism that so often stops us even starting. We've looked at practical tools you can use right away. Simplify, small, short, and slow to beat overwhelm. And that powerful DOC technique, do, observe, correct for steady, non-emotional improvement. These aren't just ideas. They're real ways to bring more calm, more presence, more effectiveness into your life.
Yeah, and if we zoom out to the bigger picture, what this deep dive really shows is that true happiness, true mastery, that deep fulfillment, it doesn't live at some fixed endpoint. Perfection, like Stirner says, isn't a destination. It's the ongoing motion of growth itself, limitless, expanding. The real fulfillment comes from consciously choosing to find the joy, the meaning, the presence in every single step of the journey. No matter how small that step seems, it's about consciously shaping our habits, our responses, our inner dialogue, cultivating that calm equanimity even when things get tough. allowing for a more deliberate, more peaceful, and ultimately a much more deeply satisfying experience of life. It's knowing your identity isn't fixed. It's shaped by the habits you choose to practice. And with consistent, intentional practice, you really do have the power to guide your growth towards what truly matters to you.
Okay, here's a final provocative thought for you to take away today. Think about one daily activity, something you usually just rush through, barely noticing. Maybe washing the dishes, writing a standard email, even just walking from your front door to your car. What would actually happen if, just once, you applied Stirner's slow principle? If you truly immersed yourself in that simple process, observed every detail, every sensation, without judgment, what unexpected bit of joy or maybe profound calm or a surprising insight might you discover just by allowing yourself to be fully present in that ordinary moment?